Concerned about future terrorist attacks here? Back to the poll very briefly. 2 more questions, Sandy. Concerned about future terrorist attacks here? 87% of the people we asked said yes. Seems like a sensible answer given what's happened today, and 12% said no. And worried? And this is where we've talked extensively today, or not extensively, but occasionally, about the effect on the national psychology. Are you worried, or someone, you or someone close to you, may be victimized? And 47% said yes, and 52% said no. So that's what we find in an early poll from our polling institute today, asking those very obvious questions in the wake of these attacks in New York and outside Washington today. Those voices from the street are very, very important. Here's Charlie Gibson with a report on them.
All emergency workers around the city are on call. There is mayhem and chaos, people running everywhere. A clear late summer day turns into what feels like a nuclear winter.
Nobody has any visibility.
People are caught in the tower, hanging out of windows, some jumping 80 floors to their deaths. Others hoping, praying to be rescued. As men and women head down, trying to flee the building, firefighters are racing up to do their job, only to become the first victims.
We better get out of the way!
Then, incredibly, Tower 1 comes tumbling, cascading down. Some of the emergency workers who managed to make it out need to be treated themselves. Fire union officials say of the first 400 firefighters on the scene, 200 are missing, probably killed. Meanwhile, there are reports at the White House that the Pentagon has been hit. A spokesman for the Pentagon said he had no firm number of casualties as firefighters struggled to contain the blaze. At 10:30 Eastern Time, the second World Trade Center tower collapses. And minutes later, a full-scale state of emergency is declared in New York.
The effort now has to be to save as many people as possible.
Police officers do everything they can to evacuate downtown Manhattan. The scene quickly turns to triage. Initial reports say at least 2,100 people have been injured, 600 of them taken to hospitals by mid-afternoon, 5 dead on arrival. 1,500 more walking wounded were taken across New York Harbor to New Jersey's Liberty State Park, and dozens of ambulances raced there as well. Meanwhile, uptown, hundreds turned out to give blood, some waiting 2 or 3 hours at blood donation centers. And then late afternoon, 5 p.m., still another building collapses. 7 World Trade Center, ruined by falling debris from the Twin Towers. But overall, there are some stories of lives saved.
As we came downstairs, we were just dragging people along with us.
At the Pentagon, workers continued through the early evening to contain the fire and smoke, but can't get to ground zero, where officials fear many are dead, including the passengers and crew from the American Airlines plane. One of those known passengers was Barbara Olson, the wife of the Solicitor General of the United States, Ted Olson. At this hour, where the World Trade Center once stood, casualties are expected to be overall in the thousands.
Mrs. Olson, who is widely known to viewers of cable and to network television around the country, is the only, to the best of my knowledge, the only person who we have publicly identified today who has been killed. And that, of course, is because, as Charlie Gibson has pointed out before, Mrs. Olson was in contact with her husband, the Solicitor General of the United States, while she was on a plane that had been taken over by terrorists. But as we heard from Mayor Giuliani earlier, and we heard from Governor Pataki, in part because, excuse me just one second, okay, in part because New York State and New York City have offices in the trade towers, and because Mayor Giuliani simply knows so many people in New York City, they know that friends and associates have been killed, and people in many, many parts of the country, without any doubt, know people who have worked in the trade towers or had offices in trade towers. And it is those people sitting on the edges of their seats tonight, perhaps desperately trying to get through to those government hotlines, which we put up on several occasions, that we will put up again as the evening ensues, desperately trying to seek information. And we don't have any in a personal way yet. The hospitals in Lower Manhattan have been to some extent overwhelmed. You see these scenes on the street as well as we do, and so you can appreciate just how enormously difficult it is at the moment to get to the point of identifying people on the ground. It has been easier and desperately sad for people who knew other people traveling on the 4 aircraft that were involved in these incidents today, because there are passenger manifestos. And we know that the airlines have, over the years, improved tremendously their capacity to get in touch with relatives. Do you remember after TWA 800 there was something of a scandal? TWA was under tremendous pressure because the families of those people involved literally went out to Kennedy Airport and stood around desperately demanding information about their friends and relatives who were on that flight. And the airlines have become much better. So people, and 266 people, we believe, were killed on those 4 aircraft today. 266 passengers and crew flying on those flights, which were taken over by terrorists and then directed at these essential American targets today. Now, it's just a little before 8 o'clock in the western part of the United States today, and in a short while from now in the eastern part of the United States, some of the local television stations, our affiliates up and down the country, will be breaking away. We'll come back in a minute, but I want to check in with Cynthia McFadden, who's been down at the Chelsea Piers, right on the river, on the Hudson River, on the west side of Manhattan. And Cynthia, you have been waiting expectantly all day, because this was the place, or this still is the place, where people are expected to be brought?
This still is officially placed, Peter, the place where people will be brought. However, we've just been told unofficially, but it appears truly, that doctors are going to be dispatched to Ground Zero. At this point, victims are trapped in the rubble, and they're sending a team of doctors to perform amputations at the site. And the reason this place is empty, filled with doctors and nurses, but not with victims, is because the victims can't get here. So they're sending a team of doctors to the site.
Cynthia, has anybody shown up there today at all? There's been this long line of ambulances behind you.
Indeed, there have been victims brought here, but most of them not severely injured. They are still expecting a massive influx of victims, Peter. And this site still stands ready with 50 operating rooms inside. But at this point, they are going to dispatch teams to perform amputations on the site.
Okay, Cynthia, thanks very much. 50 operating opportunities at Chelsea. This is this enormous sports entertainment center on the west side of Manhattan, which has been turned into a disaster preparation area at the moment, and the federal government and the state government and the city and hospitals and volunteers from every aspect of the medical community have descended on these locations tonight to be ready, lest they are able to help. Governor Pataki and the mayor of New York City, Rudy Giuliani, said a short while ago they've got enough volunteers at the moment, but the reason that the governor called for doctors, I'm going to dig through my notes here and see if I can find that number again. The reason that the governor of New York said that they were put up a couple of phone numbers was because he made it very clear that while they have enough doctors at the moment, even though the tremendous pressure on the hospitals in lower New York particularly, and burn victims have been taken to a variety of centers in New York and New Jersey and Connecticut and as far north as Canada.
The giant symbol of American financial power came crumbling down. 2 hijacked airliners loaded with scores of passengers slammed into New York's World Trade Center. The twin 110-story towers set ablaze. The well-coordinated terrorist attack began before 9 o'clock in the morning. The first plane striking the northern tower. Just 15 minutes later, another giant aircraft loaded with fuel slammed into the southern building.
Another one, another plane just hit. Right, oh my God, another plane has just hit.
With New York in shock, the towers then came tumbling down. First, Tower 1.
Top floors collapsed down.
Then, Tower 2. But the devastation didn't end there. Shortly after 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Building 7, home to many Wall Street firms, crashed to the ground. Officials say it will take days to count the number of dead and injured. But with 50,000 workers in the Trade Center alone, New York's mayor says the numbers may be too much to bear. A third plane bound for San Francisco from Newark crashed about 80 miles outside of Pittsburgh. 45 people died in that accident. And also a fourth plane went down at the Pentagon in Washington.